Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2017 sci-fi psychological horror film titled Flatliners. Now, Flatliners runs for 1 hour and 50 minutes long. It is directed by Niels Aldren Oplov. It is produced by Lawrence Mark, Michael Douglas, and Peter Safran. The script was written by Ben Ripley. It is based off of the novel Flatliners by Peter Filardi. The score was done by Nathan Barr, the cinematography by Eric Kress, and the editing was done by Tom Elkins. And the stars of the movie are Oscar-winning actress Ellen Page. Also joining is Diego Luna, Nina Dobrev, James Norton, Kiersey Clemons, Kiefer Sutherland. He was actually one of the original Flatliners from the original 1990 movie. He was originally supposed to reprise his role of Dr. Nelson Wright, but for some strange reason, he's not reprising Nelson Wright. He's playing a completely different doctor. I don't know why they did that, but it is certainly strange, nonetheless. Also joining, we have is Bo Mirchov. Let's see, we have Madison Bridges, Miguel Anthony, Jenny Raven, and Charlotte McKinney in the cast. So what did I think of this movie? You know, I sometimes think that remakes and reboots are pretty much done to death. And to me, I always find that remakes, reboots, whatever you wish to call it, it's just the result of lazy screenwriting, because it seems that Hollywood just seems to run out of new ideas. So they decide to take some old ideas from the past and bring it back to more modern times. And in this case, this is exactly what happens in Flatliners, this new reboot from the original 1990. So here we have a reboot of a movie that was never needed, let alone a movie that came out in 1990 that even people back then hardly ever remembered. This was of course originally directed by Joel Schumacher. Well, that movie was not, something that maybe you would write on a resume. So we take a forgotten movie from 1990 and we bring it back 27 years later. I don't know where the sense or the logic is in that, but okay. If only I was sitting next to Muppet characters Statler and Waldorf, we would definitely have a ball hurling heckles at this abortion of a film that is Flatliners, just to tell Hollywood we don't need any more pointless reboots and to come up with original ideas instead. There's no point in rebooting a film that was already bad before, so why now? You think that this newly rebooted Flatliners would be superior to the 1991? I don't think so. In fact, this movie is probably far worse than the original 1990. As at least the 1990 movie, I guess maybe because there was definitely far more star quality in this movie compared to this newly revamped, rebooted one. Not to say that the cast members are relatively unknown. No, they've been around quite a bit. But they just cannot measure up to the star quality that was in 1990. I mean, not compared to the likes of great actors like Kiefer Sutherland, Kevin Bacon, and Julia Roberts. Yeah, I guess also to throw in for the ride lesser prominent performers like Billy Baldwin and Oliver Platt. But still, even those guys reigns supreme to this new roster of Flatliners. So prior to watching this remake of Flatliners, I definitely saw the original 1990 Joel Schumacher to compare it to see how poorly executed this movie was by once again starring 5 medical students who experimentally kill each other to see what dimensions are in the hereafter. Yes, this is still one of the biggest mysteries in the theory of life, and that is what happens when you die. What becomes of the human soul when they die? Is there a heaven for if we do good, or a hell if we do bad? Do we start over again, like we get renewed? Like we may die from old age, like 102, and then when we die, we're back to 9 months in vitro and just start over again? Or is it the end? When we die, it's over. We just spend the rest of damnation buried in a box with doing absolutely nothing. Is that what happens to us when we die? I mean, at least the 1990 movie, original movie, as bad as it may seem, did raise that provocative question. But because since this is a remake, that question just never really fully materializes. And I never really care about the theory of life or life after death, because it's all been done before. The 1990 movie can tell you everything. This one here is just a fucking reboot. So this intrigue is not anything on my mind. This new reboot was just to compare this one to the original 1990 to see if there was anything good or original about this reboot compared to the 1990 one. That was all, the only thing that was like quenching my curiosity. So cut to 2017, and all we get is definitely just the same exact rehashing, and there's no new twists or angles or anything new to unravel during the supposed 27 years of scientific research into the unknown. So we don't really ever get what happens when we die, because it's all been done before. The mystery, the intrigue, the suspense, all thrown out the window, just over this stupid remake. The end result is that it lacks anything engaging to say, while the characters have little to be emphatic about. The script was penned by Ben Ripley, with some credit given to Peter Filardi, the original screenwriter, and he decided to up the technological ante by adding an MRI machine for these students to experiment with, while, like their audience, they definitely go brain dead for 5 minutes. All for naught, this MRI apparatus was there to inject modern machinery into a story to make us forget that this is a reboot. In fact, this new technological MRI machine, which is more of a modern technological apparatus in the medical room, definitely was only just basically used only as a means of, oh wow, this is the 21st century, so therefore there really isn't no significance that way, so they could just make us forget, hey, this is a 2017 movie, this is not 1990, we got new stuff, get with the program. That's basically the gist of what was going on here. So in other words, there really wasn't no need for this MRI thing. It was only just used as just a one-time only prop. And that was pretty much about it. It was only maybe used very sporadically. Instead, basically what it is just a retelling of an old story. That's really all it was. Okay, this sets definitely some alarming questions to boot. Yes, there is some illogical stuff, some stuff that is billed as implausible. And yes, there are a lot of questions that still remain unanswered. Almost as if I had a question I want to ask, but either because of out of time or they just simply don't want to answer my question and just completely ignore me. But hey, I still have questions, and I would very much like to have them answered in one way or another. So if these students are given access to the fully equipped abandoned section of the hospital in the basement to conduct their bizarre experiment, are they not being under surveillance? Are there no surveillance cameras in their little chamber in this abandoned hospital that nobody could see what they're up to? Did they shut down the surveillance cameras so that the security is completely oblivious to their actions? Or are we just led to believe that these kids know what they're doing? And, well, I don't even know why I'm even calling them kids. They're basically all adults. Or is the security on holiday or something? Because even in the most abandoned areas in a hospital, you would think that there would be surveillance watching these guys going through this horrible experiment that could either be a success and they can live and tell their stories about it, or fail, that once their heart stopped, it stays stopped. So there's a lot of questions about that. And you would think that they would be watched. Fortunately, they weren't. So the show must go on. So, if there was anything positive I would have to say about this movie, okay, well, I'll say one thing. This new group, this new roster of medical students is definitely an improvement from their predecessors of the 1990 film, not in terms of their acting ability, but by being, in terms of, pushing the envelope towards diversification, also pushing the envelope towards a bit of feminism, but not too excessive feminism. It's not extreme feminism in terms of this newly revamped reboot. If there was feminism, it was because the male-female ratio of these 5 medical students has improved. With this time we have 3 female medical students and 2 male medical students. So it's not complete feminist. It's not an all-girl roster, or it's not an all-guy roster. So there is some diversification in there. Also, I guess you could even simply say ethnicity-wise, yes, we have some ethnically diverse characters in there. Let's see, we have Ellen Page. She's Canadian-born. She's a Canadian-born lesbian. We have Nina Dobrev, who was an Eastern European-born Canadian. We have Diego Luna, who's born in Mexico. We have Jamie Norton, who's born in Britain. And we also have Kiersey Clemons. She's African-American. So, hey, you want to rub the envelope for diversification? There you go. This is ethnically diverse as well. So they did step up the ante to a more modernized look compared to the original 1990, which had 4 male doctors and 1 female doctor. And also pushing the diversification envelope. We have 5 medical doctors, and they're not all white toast, so to speak. There is some diversification in terms of ethnicity as well. I don't want to try and push the race envelope nor the feminist agenda. but it does actually show here. And I think it does a very commendable job at that as well. The ethnic diversity is established too, as we have a mixed bag of cultures instead of an all Caucasian roster we had in 1990. And I don't have a problem with that at all. In fact, I actually champion that. Good for them. But I do have a little bit of a legitimate beef with the age process within the characters. And I think that kind of did get me a little bit. All right. Yeah. Sometimes I think this whole idea of flatlining should be more towards the eyes of curious young adults who think that they can do this scientific breakthrough, because when you're in your 20s, you still sort of have this belief that, hey, I'm in my 20s, I'm young, I can do this. And this kind of leads to more something for an inquisitive young adult as opposed to a inquisitive middle-aged adult. That kind of like puts me in a situation where I'm scratching my head saying, why are all these middle-aged people curious about this whole flatlining, about this whole out-of-body experience into the hereafter? Why is it that they're curious about it now when they should have been more curious about it when they were in their mid-20s? All right, I guess you could say Marlowe, played by Nina Dobrev, and Sophia, played by Kiersey Clemons, they're roughly around the rightful age to play these inquisitive-minded medical students. Courtney, played by Ellen Page, the mastermind behind this whack initiative. Well, she's 30 years old, but I still think she could pass off younger than her actual age. She kind of still has that young, youthful-looking 20-something visage. But I think our male performers here, they just don't seem convincing enough to be these inquisitive-minded young adults experimenting here. Jamie, played by James Norton, he is quite long in the face, even for a 32-year-old. And the maturity level of Diego Luna's Ray was passed due to his 9 years as a firefighter in the Houston Fire Department, which definitely truly has really no significance to his work of experience. So basically his purpose really does not have very much significance. I mean, okay, I admit that there are going to be late bloomers in every field of work. That includes the medical field, sure. But this experiment these students are conducting is definitely geared towards a more youthful curiousness as opposed to more older people who should know better, which is where the 1990 film worked, because the cast back then, Julia Roberts, Kiefer Sutherland, Kevin Bacon, Billy Baldwin, and Oliver Platt, they definitely looked the part as younger than the roster we have here. I mean, Julia Roberts, she was pretty much in her early to mid-20s at the time. Kiefer Sutherland, also pretty much roughly around his mid-20s. Kevin Bacon, maybe a little bit older, but he could still get away with having a much more younger-looking visage. Billy Baldwin in his late 20s, okay, sure, why not? Oliver Platt, about 29, yeah, okay. I think you could get away with that. But here, you know, these Flatliners, this new roster just looks a little bit too overaged. So maybe I may not have a problem with the feminism or the diversification of the movie. Maybe I'm being a little bit picky with the ageism. But like I said, this whole process of flatlining should belong to much more younger, more inquisitive minds who want to go through this out-of-body experience to see what's life like when you die. So this is just something that's more for the curious youth as opposed to the curious middle-agers. Diego Luna shouldn't even have been in this cast. I mean, come on now, this guy's like, he was born 1979, so he's a little more closer to my age. And I would be definitely far too old to be in this kind of role, in this kind of situation, because it just wouldn't work. So to keep up with the new technological advances to this practice, the MRI has little in terms of the plot and wears out its welcome rather quickly. So Courtney, but still, just like the original Flatliners, you know, when they come out of their 5-minute comatose, they start to, just like in the original 1990, they start to pick up or somewhat inherit new traits that they've never done before. So now we have Courtney. She now discovers she can bake bread from her grandmother's recipe book and just seems to know how to play a piano without years of experience. Sophia, she now suddenly has this ability to solve a Rubik's Cube in no time. And when it comes to like oral medical tests from an inquisitive professor, Dr. Barry Wolfson, played by Kiefer Sutherland. Oh, by the way, that was kind of cute that they recasted Kiefer Sutherland. But why the fuck did they not just let him reprise his role as Dr. Nelson Wright? Instead, he is just a completely different character from his original 1990. At least that could have been something a little more interesting, something a little more provocative. And if he actually had more significance in this movie, instead of just playing off kind of an antagonistic foil, then maybe there could have been something a little more interesting to bring about in this contrivance of a story. I'm sorry. As much as you may think it's cute that you recasted original Flatliner Kiefer Sutherland here, if you're not going to let him reprise his original character, then there was no point of him being there just to throw in a laugh out loud cliffhanger. Or just some kind of manipulative tactic to make us watch the movie because, oh wow, look, there's at least we actually had that common sense to recast an original Flatliner, and that he was going to probably play a significant role in the story, but he was only just there as a mere cameo, just being sort of a tyrannical medical doctor who will grill you with any questions thrown at you. That's basically what his role was in this movie. Nothing real in terms of intriguing. But then, okay. So just like in the original 1990 movie, things from their past comes back to haunt them. As people they hurt, they definitely return for revenge. And now they must go out to repair the damage they've done. One of them, of course, comes in the form of some dark, somewhat evil spirit is lurking them around. Some dark, shadowy, evil spirit is lurking them around, haunting them. And eventually this spirit just keeps materializing. And so now they got to go through all this whole flatlining things to try to stop the spirit from continuing its wrath of evil. I mean, it even comes to a point where they have to kill off one of the Flatliners here. And The whole premise was just ridiculous. At least the 1990 one had a bit more of a psychological thriller to it. This one decided to go into some cheap, mindless horror movie. Oh, with plenty of PG amalgamated jump scares, which is just totally ridiculous and unnecessary for that matter. The original 1990 movie didn't make it seem haunting, but here, this reboot, they did all the scares a little too over the top, and it was definitely just an excuse to generate a reaction from the audience. Like, oh, you know, like a close-up and then you see a screaming spirit. That's basically all it was. It was just some scare tactics. They wanted to transfer from a psychological thriller with some philosophical probables to nothing more than just a mindless array of cheap thrills. It seems that director Niels Aldren Oplov seems to get under the skin of the 5 student doctors, that their lives, like so many others, have been laden with guilt, and that their quest for redemption has more, if not grim, meanings behind it. So even though this reboot takes a more haunting twist from the original, like its predecessor, it still fails to decide what genre does it want to be. Is it a supernatural entity? Is there a supernatural entity lurking in other near-death experiences? Or have they seen a new lease on life to make them better humans? It's like it wants to be one genre. One minute it wants to be a medical drama. Next minute it wants to be a psychological thriller. And the next thing you know, it wants to be a PG, watered-down horror film. It really can't decide what it wants to be. Sure, there might be also little bits of comedy thrown in as well. Hell, it even makes itself seem intelligent when it's anything but. They try to be cute and cheeky by casting Kiefer Sutherland in the cast because he was in the original 1990, and in there he plays a student teacher's doctor. But it turns out he's playing Dr. Barry Wolfson and not Dr. Nelson Wright from the original 1990 movie. It would have been cool if the students had taken some advice or some notes from Dr. Wright's desk that were meant to be destroyed and taken advantage to it. Maybe then we probably would have had a much more interesting story. Or that they were placed there to further quench the curious ways into seeking answers to other people's journeys to afterlife for further research. There are many ways they could have gone with Sutherland's existence instead of just playing for laughs or just playing just to be cute and cheeky, which was a total and utter unnecessity. There were just no reasons, purpose, or motives as to why this film was greenlit in the first place. When Marlowe said, "We're beyond expectations as to why we're having these macabre manifestations brewing in the mind." Sorry, Hollywood needs to invest in new stories, dying to be made, and stop with the reboots. It's becoming all too much. Come up with some new ideas. Come up with something that could intrigue us, something that we could, be more inquisitive towards, instead of just, trying to pretend to be something intelligent when really it isn't, or trying to think that, oh, well, what was good in 1990 could be better in 2017. Not the case. Oh, maybe people in 1990 were inquisitive as to what's life like in the afterlife. And now that all these 1990 bred teenagers are now in their 40s, maybe people in today's society who are in their 20s maybe they probably will have their own different takes or interpretations as to what happens in the afterlife. But instead, no, they don't want to go that direction. Instead, they just want to reboot, bring everything from 27 years ago back to, well, when this movie came out, it was in 2017, back into 2017, just to see if any new faces would agree or disagree with life after death. But that idea has already been taken away. Maybe if you would have just brought in a different title, concealed with a different title instead of just simply calling it Flatliners. So, you know, if you're gonna recycle an old story, at least maybe even try to manipulate us by recycling it into a new title as well. And stop giving us these remakes, these reboots. I cannot really recommend people seeing this movie. And I'm not saying that the 1990 original Flatliners was anything, but at least it was fresh and it was original. So if you want to watch Flatliners, stick to the 1991 and don't bother with this new remake. So if I was to give this movie a score out of 10, I would definitely give Flatliners a 4.5 out of 10. I can't recommend people to see this movie. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.